Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is Death Note Part 2, Episode 33, Scorn. Episode in a nutshell is a reminder of what happened in the episode. So the episode begins with Kiyomi meeting Light, and because they're only being recorded audibly, like the audio is being recorded, not visually, there's no video. He and her have a conversation and he passes her notes about what he wants her to pass on to Mikami as far as Kira's orders. Once that is done, she then passes on the orders to Mikami, which is that he's to send Light 5 blank pages of the Death Note and then create a fake Death Note and pretend to continue to kill criminals with the fake note. We then return to the task force, or Nier. Either way, Nier also then decides he's going to come to Japan and lets the task force know once he's in Japan that he has arrived and that they are going to be arresting Kira. And he then also is able to deduce that Kiyomi is the link between Mikami and Light, and that Mikami is the other Kira, and he sends one of his people to follow Mikami around. Misa is returning to the entertainment industry and runs into Kiyomi, going to dinner with her where they basically fight and argue over who is actually Light's real girlfriend, with Misa thinking she's won, but probably Kiyomi's actually the one who won. That little interaction. And then the episode ends with Mikami on the train alongside his stalker, and a woman ends up being harassed by a man on the train, and Mikami right there in the middle of the train takes out his notebook, writes down the guy's name before getting off of the train, and as his stalker's about to leave, he sees the guy fall down with a heart attack, basically confirming that Mikami is Kira, whatever number, and he's been caught literally red-handed because he did it in public like an idiot. And that's where we ended this episode. So now that we have completed the summary of the episode, we'll now rank the episode. And as always, we're ranking on 2 lists, mostly objective ranking list, followed by a personal ranking list. So starting with our mostly objective rank values, we have our single arc supporting character development, which is where Mikami is seen killing a pervert on the train. And yes, did the pervert get what was coming to him? Absolutely. But was he really, really dumb for not like keeping the face and name in his mind and killing him later rather than doing it right there in public on the train? Yes, he's also an idiot for that. That is 1 point. 2 points for our single arc main character development, which is Nier arriving in Japan and deducing that Mikami is the most likely choice that Kira would have made to be his proxy, and that Kiyomi is the link between Light and Mikami. That's worth 2 points. That brings us to 3. However, there was a negative as well, which was a negative 2 points, bringing us back down to 1. And that was, of course, all of Misa's interactions with Kiyomi. They were all distasteful. She was behaving very poorly. She was whining. She was making snide remarks. When they were having the dinner, she was guzzling alcohol like it was nobody's business and, making rude comments, and then thought she won when Kiyomi got tired of her immaturity and left because Kiyomi managed to keep her cool the entire time and, behave in a reasonable, mature adult manner. But Misa still thought she won. Anyways, it was very distasteful, so -2. And that does leave this episode objectively as a 1 out of 10. So that brings us to our Part 2 rankings so far in our mostly objective list. In first, we have selection, justice, father, transfer, abduction, impatience, and then this episode is 7th, scorn. So, personal ranking. Not a fan of this episode, as a large part of it was taken up with the Misa Kiyomi thing, and no, I didn't enjoy it at all. Like I said, Misa's behavior was terrible, but then I have said from day one that I did not like her as a character whatsoever, so I mean, it's no surprise that I found her behavior here distasteful. Kiyomi's behavior was higher, but then she also is the one who invited Misa to the dinner, like basically encouraging Misa to make a fool of herself, which is also kind of bad behavior as well. So overall, hated that part of the episode. Not a fan. Um, I also think Nier. Okay, so I've said this before too. Light and L, they had this like they were almost on an equal footing. They were playing their cat and mouse back and forth. Nier and Mello, I feel like they started at an advantage because they had all the work that Elle had done beforehand, and they knew about Light before Light knew about them, so they were able to kind of move in the shadows a bit. And I just feel like things are too easy for Nier. Like, he arrives in Japan, and then within like a couple of days of watching TV, he's like, "Oh yes, now I know. L- Light is definitely Kira. Mikami is definitely the newest Kira that's killing, and yes, Kiyomi's got to be the one who does that." And he's like putting it all together like immediately. No effort, no struggle, no up and down, nothing. Just straight up, oh, right away, I know everything. And I'm like, that's not satisfying. From like when you're watching like what does Netflix call it? A cerebral drama. When you're watching something like that, it's like you want them to have to fight for something, to put in a little bit of effort, to have steps forward before getting steps back. And Nier just doesn't seem to get that. You know, he's basically only stepping forward and he's had like 0 step backs. And as rewatchers, we know how this part ends. So like it's just too easy for him. So it's not really satisfying. And yes, I am going to say it again. I'm not a fan of part 2. I've never rewatched part 2 after the first time I watched it. This is the first time I'm rewatching it because it just doesn't live up to part 1, in my opinion, and this episode is no different. I do like that Light at least seems to be making moves that could be potentially intelligent, except for the fact that Nier's already figured him out because Light made stupid moves at the start. So even though he's starting to make smarter moves, because he's already found out they're pretty much meaningless moves. So his, going with Kiyomi, even like the going to Kiyomi and Nier calls them and he's like, "Oh, task force, let me ask you, is it video and audio or just audio?" Because he knows. And it's just not fun. So I gave this episode a 2 out of 10 because it's just not fun. And I really, really didn't like the whole, catty behavior between Misa and Kiyomi, and particularly Misa's behavior. So that brings our part 2 rankings so far on the personal ranking to in first father, second selection, third justice, fourth transfer, fifth abduction. This episode is sixth, scorn, and then impatience is in seventh place. And that now brings us to our series ranking so far. So on the mostly objective ranking, we have part 1 ending with 70.77%, part 2 with 29 out of 110, and then on the personal side, part 1 ending with 60.38%, and part 2 so far with 28 out of 110. With that, we have now rewatched and ranked Death Note, part 2, episode 33, Scorn. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.